All right, today we are diving into a huge story, what's being called the largest pandemic-related fraud in U.S. history. We're going to break down how a program that was supposed to feed children in Minnesota allegedly became the center of a billion-dollar scandal.
So let's just start with the number that's at the heart of all this. $1 billion. That's the alleged scale of this fraud scheme, a number so big it's kicked off multiple federal investigations and raised some really serious questions about oversight. And to put that number in perspective, you need to know that according to the reporting, this is being called the single largest pandemic fraud scheme in the entire country. So yeah, this isn't just some local Minnesota story. This thing has national implications.
So the big question is, how on earth does something like this even happen? Let's get into it. Our first section here is going to break down the core allegations of this billion-dollar heist, focusing on who was involved and what the initial reactions were.
Okay, so one of the first things that stands out in the reporting is the demographic breakdown of the people who've been charged. The sources we're looking at say that of the 87 people charged in connection with the fraud, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that detail has really put a major focus on Minnesota's Somali community in all the coverage of the story.
Now, in the wake of all this, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar publicly questioned, where was the oversight? Her argument, essentially, is that this whole thing happened because of really weak federal guardrails on all that COVID relief money. She's called for more investigation and has, of course, denied any personal involvement.
Okay, so this is where the story starts to get really complicated, because the reporting isn't just about the fraud itself. It's really about this whole web of alleged connections between the people charged and Representative Omar's political circle.
So the source material points to several key individuals here. First up, you have Salim Ahmed Saeed. He's a restaurant owner who actually hosted Omar's 2018 victory party and was later convicted. Then there's Guhad Hashi Saeed, who was a former campaign worker for Omar. He also pleaded guilty. And finally, there's Ali Isse, who was serving as Omar's deputy district director.
So this timeline here really helps lay out how these alleged connections progressed over time. It all kicks off in 2018 with that victory party at a restaurant co-owned by one of the individuals who was later convicted. Then, fast forward to 2020, and the reporting notes that Omar introduced legislation related to Feeding Our Future. That's the nonprofit right at the center of all this. And by 2021, her own aide was out there publicly defending that very same organization from state investigators.
All right, so how did this whole scheme supposedly work? Let's follow the money and break down the mechanics, at least according to what federal prosecutors are saying. So the central player in all of this was a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future. Now, prosecutors allege that this organization, which was supposed to be distributing federal food aid, was basically used as a giant pass-through. The claim is that it funneled $250 million to dozens of fraudulent sites that they just made up names of kids and send in fake invoices for meals that were never even served.
And this slide right here really drives home the alleged disconnect. The whole point of this money was to feed kids, right? But what prosecutors claim is that individuals, like Salim Ahmed Said, used it for, very different things. We're talking about a $2 million mansion and a $9,000 a month shopping habit.
And just to add another layer to this whole thing, the reporting points out that Representative Omar herself actually appeared in a promotional video for Feeding Our Future. Yep, the same nonprofit now at the center of this massive fraud case.
So, with all these connections being reported, it's no surprise that the scrutiny has really turned to Representative Omar. This next section is all about her official response and what the reporting says about her personal finances.
And this investigation has seriously escalated. According to the source material, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said his department is actively tracking money that was allegedly transferred overseas from the people who committed the fraud. They're looking at destinations in the Middle East and even Somalia. For her part, Representative Omar's office has been pretty clear in how they're responding to questions about campaign finances. They've stated that any campaign money they got from people who've since been convicted in this case has been returned.
Okay, get ready for another really striking number from the reporting, 46,000%. That figure represents the alleged increase in Representative Omar's net worth since she was first elected. So let's break that down a bit. When she was first elected back in 2018, Representative Omar reported a negative net worth. But according to a financial disclosure statement from May of this year, her net worth, combined with her husband's assets, is now reported to be as high as $30 million. Now, this huge reported financial jump, along with all the other allegations, has led to some pretty direct accusations.
For instance, the source material quotes Bill Glahn, who's a policy fellow at a Minnesota-based think tank, and he claims that Representative Omar personally knew the people who were making millions from this program.
And all of this brings us to our final section, the unanswered questions. I mean, with so many moving parts and such serious allegations, what's next in this massive investigation?
So here's what the reporting tells us is happening right now. First, the Treasury Department is digging into campaign contributions to Minnesota lawmakers. Then, there's a much more serious question they're investigating. Did any of this stolen money get funneled to the al-Qaeda affiliate al-Shabaab? And of course, if that turns out to be true, the FBI would then step in to investigate any potential funding of terrorist groups.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear this story is a long way from being over. You've got multiple federal agencies involved, a money trail that apparently stretches across the globe, and some really significant political implications. There are just so many unanswered questions. But the biggest one, the one that hangs over all of this is, what is the full story behind the missing billion?